Alex Walton and Mary Wilson. I'm the curator, or we curate the fall Holloway series. And I'll thank our friends from Moe's Books over here. They have books by all the readers, so I have books. There's a lot happening this semester in terms of poetry and its allies. The fall Holloway lineup will include Roberto Harrison on the 20th of September, Sara Nicholson, who's the Holloway poet this year, on the 26th of September, Evie Shockley on the 2nd of October, and Tom Picard on the 18th of October. Other things are happening as well. Atlantic Drift program will take place on Monday, September 10th from 5 to 7 here in the Mod 5 room, with a reception in the English Department Lounge afterwards. That's going to be two poets from the United Kingdom. James Byrne and Zoe Scolding will join two poets from the United States, Forrest Gander and Bono Kapil, in a reading and discussion about interrelationships between innovative poets in both nations. The event is hosted by Hejinian with support from Bob Hass. A group reading of Chaucer's Parliament of Fowls will take place on Thursday, September 27th from 5 to 6:30 in the English Department Lounge down the hall. All members of the English Department, faculty, grad students, undergrad students, staff are welcome to participate in bilingual copies of the text, and the original Middle English and modern English translation will be made available. Paul Muldoon will be here on the poet Paul Muldoon from Ireland. His reading will be here in the Mod 5 room on Thursday, October 11th, from 6 to 7:30. There'll be wall posters up about all these things. Bill Porter, also known as Red Pine, translator of Tang poetry, will be reading and talking about translation on September 13th. I'm going to proceed with the reading alphabetically by last name, but with Sara Nicholson, the Holloway poet, going last. I'm Cecil Giscombe, alphabetical. My select in a new poetry book is called Similarly, and it's to be published supposedly a year from now. Robert Hass has a book of poems which the title is, there's some contention around that, forthcoming in the spring, he says. Lynn Hejinian has two new books plus a reissue forthcoming, Positions of the Sun, which is prose from Belladonna this fall, and Tribunal poetry from Omnidon in the spring. And there's also the reissue of Ahata, a short Russian novel from Western University Press this coming winter. Ahata is a Russian word meaning both desire and hunt. Geoffrey G. O'Brien is the author most recently of Experience in Groups, that's this year, 2018, and People on Sunday, both from Wave Books. John Shoptaw's Times Beach won the Northern California Book Award in Poetry and the Notre Dame Review Book Award. He has 4 poems forthcoming in the environmental issues of the Kenyan Review and Manoa Journal from Hawaii. And his poetry has just been incorporated by Jenny Holzer into her installation for San Francisco's Trans-Bay Transit Center. So when you take the bus, you can think of John. Sara Nicholson, who is this year's Holloway poet, is the author of What the Lyric Is and The Living Method, both from Song Cave, and she's visiting from Arkansas. And readers will read in that order. And I'm up here, so I'll start. Okay. I'm going to read 2 fragments from a book in progress called Negro Mountain. The summit of Negro Mountain, as you all certainly know, is the highest point in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I lived in central Pennsylvania for 10 years earlier in this century. The first is from a later section of the book titled Notes on Region. Wolves came back to Negro Mountain. There was no pattern to it for either mountain or animals to occupy. It was not a story, but rather undetectable weight. It was shapeless, finally, unmeasured. It was only relayed. Negro Mountain, the summit of which is the highest point in Pennsylvania, is a default, a way, among others, to think about the Commonwealth. The Negro Mountain is so called because after Braddock's defeat on the Monongahela, a scouting party traveling Braddock's Road came in contact with a like party of Indians when a skirmish ensued in which one Indian was killed and a very large Negro mortally wounded. Talk on top of one another, you mountains. Lie atop one another, anyone could say. Among you, it could be the figure's motion between the reader and, say, the poem or the mountain at hand. Speaker, observer, Negro, poet, wolf, measure, all you. What else might a Negro speaker ask? The roads are often empty. A Negro speaker might ask what he or she was expected to represent in the field or at a roadside or between the trees. Intimacy might be an answer. Sourceless intimacy, in terms of familiar knowledge or claim of such or recognition of it in among the trees, is naturally ungainly. Of course, or coarse, perhaps in some descriptions, lewd. What Negro? Negro Mountains are ridge on the same long plateau as the Endless Mountains, however its appearance is that of low relief. Shape fails, finally, perhaps it's how you, meaning the speaker and the reader as well, perceive the shape failing, since all that's too large to accommodate by sight or by any of the senses. Representation, a kind of dexterity or sleight of hand, once again places you. The shape shifting, however, is irreducible, its interruption itself. Perhaps the big Negro at hand was, in effect, a country doctor, versed, practical, aloof. The mountain intervenes. The mountains intervene. Performance at a scattershot watery town at the bottom of the hills. The skinny Negro at the door to the theater said, "Take your dinner in." He said, "Don't lose your money." He said, "Remember where you put it, the money, at the mouth of the theater. Remember what you did with it," he said. The observation or claim that paradise is full of tremendous images is something a Negro might make or might have said. That paradise is incomplete without both the appearance and the sharp absence of its predators is a different animal. One animal is a color, such as description, and the other's God. "What's your real name?" an old gentleman might ask. "I'm the only dog on the plateau," I said. "Measure is measure any given day." "I can teach you image," I said, "but you won't like it." Okay, and I'm going to read you another poem from an early series in the Negro Mountain book. This is called series is called Seven Dreams. This is the fourth dream from Negro Mountain. Typical crime drama in which I was being transferred to Ohio, going home for punishment, for execution. From what place? An older girl was driving me there, and others, boys and girls, were lounging in the back seat, but I was handcuffed somehow to the older girl who had been my friend in real life. I was to be pushed from an airplane, and I calculated the possibilities for the execution itself failing, that is, for surviving the fall, for my abilities saving me. I could simply ride the thermals hawk-like, or I could swing down, as Tarzan would, on a long vine. And finally, this was not another country, but my Ohio, my terracotta landing strip, home court. So I thought that it'd be in the cards that I'd not die, or that I could just let it go, if you know what I mean. But as we neared the state line, I saw how unrealistic that was, and that I'd have to separate myself from my old friend. This, as the country itself turned familiar, meaning I saw that it would come to the colored suburb, the ranch houses owned by black doctors and their wives. Some on low hills, all well made, each one set back from the road with a long driveway curving in each instance to an attached garage, and that would soon come to the intersection by Kathy Ford's place, at which point, in the dream, I saw that it'd all be wild cards. The countryside was the same old, but my friend with whom I'd worked in the hospital elsewhere, this in my youth was a test, and I wondered what the right moment would be to separate from her after all these years, and then saw I had no plan, at least in the dream. Like most Negroes, I am interested in captivity and in the ideas of punishment and public sacrifice. If your luck holds, you can outlive the consequences. Like most of us, I've wanted to come home. Love could repeat like scenery does, or copy itself. You might luck on out vis-a-vis the competition. My friend, the older girl, and I had shared neither bed nor hillside bower. Love's punishment as well, isn't it? Articulated over the landscape. Love's poison, Daddy. What did you expect? Who's going to be the Tarzan figure after all? And who's the blank slate? Still asleep, but I started to wonder if they expected me to let them execute me, to nudge me on out of the growling airplane's door. Monkey Man said, let it go. Wolfman said, push me, fool. Thank you. Please welcome Bob Hess.
Thank you. Amazing poems. We should get there together every night and just tell each other our dreams. Yes. It's a pleasure to be reading with my colleagues and to welcome Sara Nicholson to Berkeley. We're so happy she's here. This is a poem called Pertinent Divagations Toward an Ode to Inuit Carvers. Because it resembles a sphere, meaning a figure on which every point of its surface is equally distant from its center, but is a physical object, not a sphere, because as a practical matter, an actual physical object cannot be constructed which has a surface, every point of which is equidistant from its center. Pablo Neruda may have missed an opportunity in failing to address an ode to the softball. Ah, sexual moon of summer nights, the something to hit that initiates an intricate ballet of chance and rule-governed behavior on summer afternoons. And for that matter, he missed the soccer ball, known in the civilized world as the football, which may have been, as a thought, more culturally available to him. And Octavio Paz, why did you keep your silence on the almost perfectly round stones that are still to be found lying around the ruins, the ball courts in Aztec ruins? Hot day, the tar and vanilla scent of dry summer grasses, the blue-bellied lizards so still on the stone walls they seem to be listening to the roar of crowds from Montezuma's last weeks diminishing in the distance like a train whistle. And poor Lopez, you were wrong to propose in the journalist bar in Mexico City after everyone had had lunch and a couple of caballitos, meaning little horses, meaning shots of tequila served in tiny ceramic cups, the blue color of melancholy when it's just beginning to turn the corner and get a grip on itself. You were wrong to say that women only like to watch baseball on television and in ballparks because the uniform made men's butts pleasant objects of contemplation. Even the women at our table were outraged by this suggestion, and it's no wonder no one gets much work done after 3 o'clock in Mexico City. And that night, when the weather had cooled Pura, her crinkly black hair cut boyishly, the shiny and almost perfectly round brown irises of her eyes lifted to heaven, singing the soprano part in a Palestrina motet in an almost intimate Baroque church in Cuernavaca, not a trace of irony in her gammons or angel gammons face. Since this is a preface to an ode circumambulating the softball, or the polyphony of Palestrina, almost perfect is the theme. If Plato could have had his way, the Earth were a sphere instead of almost a sphere, there would probably not be a wobble in its rotation, and hence no ice ages. And how would you have got through interminable afternoons in the 4th grade if there were no pictures of woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers as objects of pleasant contemplation in posters on the wall? And while we are on the subject, have you noticed that there are never any pictures of Ice Age dinosaurs? That there is a profoundly tropicality-centric representation of their 3 million years of an earthly domain in all the textbooks? Ice Age reptiles. We have wandered far from our subject, have we not? Or not? Think of the whiteness of the softball. Imagine a world in which dental and medical care for children were so completely available that all adults in both hemispheres had, at least in their 20s and 30s, almost perfectly white teeth. It implies, does it not, a completely different distribution of wealth? That's my point. We are governed by Ice Age reptiles. What if the cycle of oil wars were over and the undistribution of automatic weapons had commenced and the wars of distributive vengeance withered away and the insurrection against grasping dictatorial power rendered irrelevant? Everyone could be playing or watching softball. It's only a pop-up. An almost perfectly white day moon of an almost perfectly spherical softball looping through the blue summer air as if it were some sublimely graceful Ice Age sea creature riding the ocean of the air. And she's underneath it looking up, almost as if she were singing a Palestrina motet, the one in which the angel tells the young woman she is full of grace. The whole spectatorial world has assembled, leaning forward, sipping beer or not, sipping as yet to be invented ginger and anise-flavored beverage concoctions that our endlessly inventive kind has not yet devised, but with a pleasant and familiar fizziness imparted to the nostrils. No one knows yet whether she will catch it. She doesn't know. But this is a poem in praise of imperfection. Freedom from fear, freedom from violence, smiles the almost perfect white of the new tusks of an unmolested walrus pup. This is a poem to old Eskimos and the tools they fashioned to fashion dolphins leaping from the lovely, pale umber, formerly white, of old ivory. Thanks. Thank you.
Alphabetically, I always come after Bob Cass, and it's always an intimidating thing. That was great, and yeah, here we are. So I'm going to read from, I have 2 new books coming out, not going to read from those, and I'm reading from a book that is self-published, came out in 2002, called Slowly, and I want to dedicate my reading from it to the people who have been engaged and are being engaged or would have been engaged if they didn't have schedule conflicts in my grad seminar on everyday life. The little book is called Slowly. I wake to the waking shadow of the world the waking have in common for one long visit slowly. I walk rather than speed up the ordinary unfolding. One has to wait for the lateness of the day with recalcitrance circulating, to stop in the midst of traffic in a blind spot that flows around one smoothly, to regard the dark building without apology. Movement prolongs the finitudes a person moving achieves, which lacks finality imperceptibly. Out the dark door, over black leaves, putting into motion what painters have known for years, I see that the night is in the mind before it ever gets to day. Colors, creating forms, are left for the imagination to turn from birds in flight to photographs of same, or nearly same. The middle of my face aches as if with cold a physicist can detect as an acceleration I'm slowing. Or there might be scores a physician scorning dreams should nonetheless excise as extended omens. Omens always have a psychological twist indomitable will exercises. What one clearly sees comes up momentarily in implausibly submerged assertions as generosity. Slowly things, partly because of damage, are represented as ghosts grown too quickly. Repetitive exposure to anything provokes sensations. I'm always moving around incessantly, which is dubious animation, seemingly not chosen. The old city skyscraper rises today with pathos that propels the change from one sensation to another, daily bound a short way. I recognize it as a skyscraper by going mentally around the information given. It inclines its crown. Its walls come from a dune. Its shadows briefly fall, like light upon the patterns of motion of the mottled pigeons that flutter in the gutter, and like a photograph captures the feeling of transience. Light the eye adds to the evidence falls on a scene as the scene outside its shadow. Lettered passers-by pass by what history has for us. The vanquished sit at the center of their world, intransigently outskirting. My eye caught the light, a rock approximately the size of a head, and something was said regarding fate surreptitiously. Each fate is phrased, fate in sequences. My hand mentally grabs the glass just before it hits the floor suddenly. Fate is a term for the present, a name for time regained. Clichés develop in the dark, and they are known in a flash as hallucinations. In the one called Wouldn't You Know It, a dachshund comes out from under the bed. It is the usual dachshund, the decisively irascible fat one. If I had to do it all over again, I'd call it Beethoven, and after a while, lately. But the hallucination known as to do it all over again takes the kind of time we are immediately fated not to have. I go slowly in acknowledgement and know I'll have to go there again. Events have many centers, and they fall into ruins like solemnly decomposing cliffs usefully. They while away. If you know little about hot springs and volcanoes, then you can look them up. There will always be a hole in the picture, or holes will appear abundantly without useful copy, however. This describes things historically like mystification, we think for ourselves, but not only that, look up history. Look up cloud quantity, see organization, suction, cascade, antonym fixity. Look up cascade, see deliberation, failure, sincerest repeat. Look up sincerest repeat, see aftermath. Look up aftermath, see fugue, history, perceptible color. Look up perceptible color, see unit of cognition, common sense, paint. Look up paint, see painting, antonym blank. Look up painting, see critical inches, see color above. Cobalt gray, viridian gray, gray lake, inch, look up. Look up inch, see premonition, fabric, millimeters. Look up millimeters, see wider films, see fate ramble, fate flicker, reality sucking up fate. It's rare to see fate sweating. Observation doesn't reveal one's own reality, but the reality of things that are foreign to one, proving one's alienation, one's unreality, a very nice creature and rare. Whoa, whoa, back up. Whoa, what's that? Quickly. Thanks.
despite the vast alphabetical distance, I always have to come after Lithuania. We need an L. I'm going to read the 2 new poems I've managed since my book. The first might as well be dedicated to all of you. It refers to Berkeley in several ways and is about the disorganizing experience of 1 minute running with my dog in Tilden, who many of you have met, and 45 minutes later shouldering my way through neo-Nazis and other species of white supremacists, if there are, on campus to get to class. Tilden. I should say a few things before I begin. Hell is easy. We brought us here, and not for the first time. The park is large and full of diversion, if relatively unpopulated. From a good high place, one can see the built distance gleam. There really is no other word for it, or phrase, for how serenely, sedately, the towers crowd together. Crisis is the truth in view, the one side of many. Before it was over, I began this poem quite differently, walking while still of several minds, but each mainly preoccupied with what blue would do to green, where they meet or seem to. I would avoid everything else, exchanging the battles in park and campus plaza over the stupid future of whiteness for this light blue running up and over that hill I'll mention again later. A hell blue that disappears upon moving any closer to it, fleeing intimacy, only speaking to the eye from remote locations, say horizon, the mistaken theory. An eye tries every moment by turning the fact of the whole curve into a line and the line into an unagonized meeting place as real as time. When thinking almost forgets itself, it sees huge battlegrounds of color. 2 plazas were just the one, 2 bridges for each actual span across the 2 dark blue bodies of water, visible from atop the aforementioned hill, from which I can see, through the limits of my vantage, how all kinds of mistake are eager to gather, especially at the edges. Out of the corner, I only know the other world doesn't yet come to pass, the eye test. The same way I understand this one could be better. Not exactly everything it's cracked up to be, now that lately, these days, where they're coming again, from thinking's dead narrow, from etc. itself, draped in red and dark blue and white and black, to stand in or as facsimiles of intimacy, shouting as much into mouths as ears, their foam and content. There is blue even over their heads, and background noise flowing out relation song. It is the mask of a lovely day that argues we should be content with semi-automatic happiness. But some of us always aren't ourselves enough to take it. Isolate identity conceals collective anonymity the way blue blocks air. If the face hides a mask, then it is one too. From which hill you can see both at once and not be wrong, all the way to the steps that begin where they end. This is cheerful. What you can do now. Whichever way you lean the trash, it falls the other. Parable almost, yours to understand, of which you are the shifting contents, the Western results, 5-4 decision to be taken outside. It goes in the green, no, the gray bin, waiting patiently for Monday pickup, almost the last time constantly. You sit in the chair, you slide out of it, about to return, often and always saying whatever history occurs to you to say from its newest idea of a cage. Fortunately, you are this side of it. Unfortunately, this is still motion through and inside, unendurably withstood. The direct subject, only lightly used. The traditional choice, some and none, each a small change to the loss preserved in making it, while loss is change in its unused form. But please feel free to enjoy this pale dream of a damaged state. So rich the day's the night. Whichever way you look, you're standing in the shade of men, squinting out into the reliable, dull brightness layering what isn't your time, seconds that bear a weak resemblance to unread directions for installing it. The only authority is use, effort the only palace, between not yet, here, and never. This is what else is tragedy, heading to an appointment with the unscheduled. Past these trivial streets, fronted by summer's cafes, that obdurate yard feeling happens on before repairing back to the usual interior, provided upon request, full of corporate traces, traditional to drink it as an endless experience of little differences repetition hides in. I picked one and ran with it, moving forward by stepping to the side.
So even though it's called the Transbay Transit Center, I know it's only a glorified bus station. I know this.
It's a great bus station. I was there the other day.
Well, I've got some poems for you, 3 this evening. First is called A Tree's Shade Speaks of Its Shadow. A shade looks into its shadow, as you do, into a mirror, and longs to immerse itself in it, as you would in a lake. And as you flatter yourself that that snapshot of you is a poor likeness, a shade dislikes having its shadow taken for itself, voluminous, unseeable, damp and cool, hospitable to lawn chairs and sword ferns, incised sharply in the air like a deep jigsaw puzzle piece, vaulted, swaying in the heat, growing penumbral as it goes down to take shape as its shadow. On shady days, the shadows are nowhere to be seen, or everywhere. Then the sun comes back and redefines all the shadows, all but those of the blighted and beetled, whose shades hover for a spell above their names: American chestnut, ash. Another poem about somewhat obscure relation. This one admittedly far-fetched. It's called Near-Earth Object. Unlike the monarch, though the asteroid also slipped quietly from its colony on its annular migration between Jupiter and Mars, enticed maybe by our planetary pollen, as the monarch by my neighbor's slender-leaved milkweed. Unlike it, even when the fragrant Cretaceous atmosphere meteorized the airborne rock, flaring it into what might have looked to the horrid Triceratops like a monarch ovipositing? Had the butterfly begun before the period broke off? Not much like the monarch I met when I rushed out the door for the 79, though the sulfurous dust from the meteoric impact off the Yucatan took flight for all corners of the heavens the way the next generation of monarchs took wing from the milkweed for their annual migration to the Yucatan Peninsula, and their unburdened mother took her final flit up my flagstone walkway, froze, and hurtling downward, impacted my stunned peninsular left foot. Less like the monarch for all this, the globe-clogging asteroid, than like me, one of my kind, bolting for the bus. This one is called Vertigo. This morning's drive down the Redwood coast needs to be postponed. The weather reports it's a spare the air day. Today, filling up already with particulate smoke and ash flakes. Last night, far north of the bay, a wildfire made its own weather, like a raving forest psyche or a climate, whipping up a fire whirl, a funnel storm, a fire NATO that twisted conifers, photo albums, and stiff chaparral aloft and ablaze, and spiraled skyward into a mile-high air torrent that jetted across the continent over New York, New England, and the North Atlantic. Unbelievable, we say, meaning inconceivable, a staggering wonder that plunges some of us into an inert disbelief. As Jimmy and Kim were driven up from Hitch's wooded estate north of Santa Cruz, so Madeline drove Scotty down the peninsula, parking her green Jaguar at the sunny brink of the Big Basin redwood forest, which makes its own atmosphere like a planet, verdant with fog and giddy with oxygen. They enter in silence its dark cinematic hush and pause before a tree grown to a vertiginous height. Always green, Scotty glosses sempervirens, ever living. They reappear before a huge redwood cross-section with dated growth rings. 1066, Battle of Hastings. 1930, tree cut down. 1958, filming of Vertigo floats a little beyond the fibrous red bark, like a vapor. Looking at it feels like looking down into an incredibly deep well. That perspective narrows into a funnel. The collapse of the historical background into the present, film buffs will recognize as the Hitchcock dolly zoom, or the Vertigo effect, when the camera backs out and zooms in, or zooms out and closes in, so that viewers suddenly become aware of the scene, impinging on or casting off from its central character. Usually, it's hard to see the climate for the days. The carbon emissions from Madeline's green Jaguar doing their part to this day to heat our planet. But an unreal, sensational weather event will zoom the overlying climate into focus for a moment and bathe us in an icy astonishment, as though the Earth looked around and saw it was the only planet swaddled in habitable gases. But nothing can keep on living like that. So the days look up and move on. The smoke turns away from the bay, and tomorrow they say the weather will be fine. Thank you. Please welcome Sara Nicholson.
It's great to be here in the Bay Area and at Berkeley, and an honor to meet everyone and to get to read with you guys today. I'm just going to read a couple of new poems. Spain. Having never been to Spain, I left for it, as one who hazards faith in vagueness. The rose shrieks each autumn, dies tragically. The pomegranate, too, has nothing of interest to say. All fruit trees flower, but in Spain they florisson. Minor differences of sounds like these, the traveler must learn. One must occasionally allow oneself bourgeois imaginings, as of wine flights by the sea, or the carpeted staircases of castles renovated by the state. I am a very rich woman who winters in Tenerife. The Spanish crown seeks my guidance on all matters Tenerife-related. I feel melancholy when it snows over the Atlantic from the window of my Castillo. Mere presence with no cause for concern. My life is lived for me by others, portioned out in intervals of rest and music. It should be obvious by now that I have many servants. All are well paid. The white buildings of Cadiz communicate in pictures other truths than those intended. The act of reading has become for me a form of blunt force trauma to the head. Thus was I persuaded to enter this sanatorium, where beneath the well-clipped ilex, acorn-fed swine roam wild, until the peasants slaughter them for their sweet flesh, rumored to have healing properties. I am here for my health, trusting that the Mediterranean will work its slow miracle on the brain. I was born for convalescence, the daughter of Doña Maria Baronesa. Each September, I leave a flower on her grave. Salmon and rice. Nature grows possessive of her job prospects. I must light the stove by hand as the igniter is dead, the man from Sears said. I see my name with the names of others, a line, on the shell in the hand, of the spear-born goddess, destroyer of cities, wild-caught daughter of Zeus, the patroness of wisdom, she who Skypes into classrooms and loves not easily or well, or at all really. Wheretofore I observe the clouds, like friends, wandering off beyond our line of sight, mine or thine or y'all's vision, sweet and bitter, accomplishing one thing at a time if we can. The coast, in which a city sees itself reflected back. The most determined parts of palms or vines that wave at the surface from which I wave back to them are beautiful, intent on finishing off pavement the way city weeds do again in April. The way a blackbird's reds and whites were sung by St. Augustine, chorus the city calls out of adoration to pursue, death, the poverty of daisies, pinks and blues that crack the surface the city's founded on. I want them all, the standard images, the birds and flowers, foliage on mountains. Oh, read me into the heart of the sun, my brilliant friend with benefits. Pick up and read of us who live here, if in the fall we cohabit, you and I, the pronoun, the luminous one, whose breakage poems attend to. But be not cruel horizontals as you sleep in my dark garden. Strive instead to reason from experience and love the city the coast reflects. The sea was never historyless, which is a word we use when we don't know a thing's history. What is it even there for, the sea, except as something ambient to be written of time and time again, reduced to zero out of cruelty and love? For what else are we here for but to observe the way rain in cities husbanded the trees? Whether or not it's possible to be worthy of the month of October and April again, where nothing was worthy of metaphor but this and us. This one has a silly tag. It's, constancy is love's impostor, pride is manservant, deception his shield. I mean this. I'm here because I was told to be a child who lost his English in the rain, who'd someday tell the story of his life in exile, the passion and virtue of things without a name, the flagons and eels hidden in a hayrick, notes in a glass of water beneath the rock, upon which rain warps the gold throats of bluets so carelessly to suffer, art to exist. As prove and love grew off-rhyme with the ages, that we might read the change as meaningful, so the wind spoke ex cathedra every morning we learned to speak again through the air, because the world sucks, all feeling from us to live. It hurts to be, to make or do, to find. A little boy lost in the rain in 10 years would become a scribe and spend a lifetime erasing the calf from the vellum, scraping the recto, suffering it to belong to him. And one more. Wind, rain, and poetry. It can be nice some days to sit down and think. Fresh air is good. Matter and variety is good for the body. A little pepper on the biscuit, not too much onion, just a slice. The sea is calm tonight. I sought a theme and sought for it in vain. I'm tired, the wind is blowing only just. In the picture you sent me from Corfu, birds elbow their way through the marketplace, bored with desiring, exchanging ticket for ticket, sale for sale, and we turn back. Thanks.
Thank you to the readers, and thank all of you for coming to this event. Come back on the 10th for the Atlantic Drift event. That's from 5 until 7 o'clock in this very room. Stop at Moe's on the way out, buy a book, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again.
September the 4th and October the 11th are my free choices. Yeah.